good morning. Welcome to CATEX TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. Today is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2014. Well, if you're Vladimir Putin, you've got a lot of things on your plate right now. Of course, in Russia, they're still hunting for 3 so-called Black Widow female suicide bombers who have been identified by law enforcement authorities as being prepared to blow themselves up to disrupt the Sochi Olympics, which start on February 9th. Meanwhile, just to the south of Russia, President Putin is concerned with what's going on in the Ukraine. And right now, the situation in the Ukrainian capital of Kiev is quite tense. Last evening, Ukrainian military authorities began to dismantle the workers' protest camp in downtown Kiev. This was in the middle of a serious snowstorm. However, there were people there who were determined not to let that happen. 3 of the protesters were shot and killed. 2 of them were found dead in the National Library, where they apparently had crawled into to get out of the cold and attempt to receive some medical aid. The other one was found outside. The Ukrainian authorities continue to say that those killed and those trying to disrupt the takedown of the protesters' camp are simply criminals. The situation there will continue to worsen. Meanwhile, in the northeastern United States, specifically here in the New York metropolitan area, a major winter storm hit last night. The area around Princeton, New Jersey, for example, where we're broadcasting from, received about 15 inches of snow. The temperature this morning was 3 degrees Fahrenheit. With the wind chill, it's considerably lower than that. There were a number of flights canceled. Already 1,400 flights coming into and out of the U.S. were canceled today. Yesterday, some 3,000 flights were canceled as well. Meanwhile, yesterday, the U.S. Property and Casualty Insured Travelers released their quarterly earnings announcement. It was quite good, actually. They actually generated an operating profit of $2.68 a share for the 3 months ending on December 31st. This was up from 72 cents a year earlier. It beat the consensus analyst forecast of $2.15. It was a tremendous quarter, but the stock market punished them. Their shares were down about 2% yesterday. The reason it went down is because the prices of premiums had only increased 5.9% during the quarter instead of 7%, at which rate they increased in the third quarter. If anybody had been following what's going on in the insurance sector, they would know that prices are dropping like rocks. So this was not particularly big news. Meanwhile, the Arctic Ocean seems to be warming. We've talked about this in the past. Summer sea ice there has shrunk by about 66% over the past 30 years, and maritime nations are about ready to agree on a landmark deal called the Polar Code, which will improve safety and lead to lower insurance premiums. Right now, the Northern Sea route along Russia's edge can reduce the sailing distance between Asian ports and Northern Europe by about 40%. If you look at a globe on the map of a globe of the Earth, you'll see that that's exactly true. Right now, only 71 ships crossed the so-called Northern Sea route last year, compared to about 18,000 that went through the Suez Canal. But about 1,000 vessels traveled into the high Arctic, with much of the growth coming from oil and gas activities, particularly in Russia. The high Arctic is classified as above 72 degrees north in latitude. If you sail a ship 72 degrees north latitude, you need special insurance. The idea of the Polar Code is to try to leaven that out and standardize it so that special insurance premiums are not put into place for those ships that go north of 72 degrees. Meanwhile, speaking of shipping, 24 crewmen aboard a sinking cargo ship bound for China were rescued on Sunday near Guam. The name of the ship that went down, or actually that was abandoned, is a 500-foot cargo vessel called the Rich Forest. The Coast Guard put out an alert to ships in the area. The 24 crewmen were picked up by a merchant ship that was nearby after being in the water in life rafts for 3 hours. 2 Coast Guard cutters are arriving on the scene today and will pick the crewmen up. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard has issued a notice to mariners in the area that the 500-foot-long Rich Forest remains unpowered and adrift, and that if anybody sees it, they should drop a dime and call the Coast Guard and tell them that they've come across it. Iranian oil exports have picked up a little bit. This is in January. This is for the third consecutive month. This has nothing to do with the easing of sanctions, which were just eased earlier this week. However, it does indicate signs that, in fact, the easing of the sanctions is going to be a very positive benefit. It seems that the people in Turkey are still importing about 105,000 barrels a day. China's purchases remain firm. Syria is still picking up modest cargoes. South Korea and Japan as well have begun to uptick in what they're importing from the Iranians. Now, the big question that comes up now is that the insurance rules are going to be put into place sometime in the next 2 weeks, and the London property and insurance clubs that insure maritime business are going to begin to pick up these policies. However, the waiver is only for 6 months. It's a 6-month interregnum until January 22nd, at which time the U.S. government and the EU are going to look at the sanctions and look at the Iranians' activities and see how far, whether they've progressed in the agreement on the nuclear issue. If they have not, they will yank the policies again. There's some trepidation in London now about writing policies longer than 6 months. Meanwhile, we've reported on this a few times. Saudi Arabia has cracked down on foreign workers over the past several months. In fact, they've expelled about 1 million foreign workers out of a total of 9 million. This is in an effort to create more jobs for Saudis. However, in the most recent economic statistics released by the Saudi government, this has had a chilling effect on the economic activity there. Of course, the oil sector remains immune from this, largely insulated from the labor crackdown, as state-owned giants such as Saudi Aramco continue to be able to obtain the workers they need. However, construction, landscape, and other things that require manual labor have been hit very hard. That's the news for today. If we have any breaking news, we'll come back and tell you. Thank you for watching, and we will see you tomorrow.